Hello, everyone. My name is Tim DePack, and I'm from Winsor & Newton. I'll be your moderator for today's class. I'd like to welcome you to today's class, which is the Winsor & Newton Birdhouse with Songbirds wall art. And this is our third class in our Birds of a Feather series of classes, which are being run every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central Time throughout the month of April. For those of you who have missed the previous two classes, I'll share the link for the video replays in the chat throughout the class. I'm being joined by Mandy Peltier, who will be your artist instructor for today's class as well, as the rest of the series. And Mandy will be taking you through today's class by providing information about the products being used and showing you how to perform some of her favorite watercolor painting techniques, all while creating these lovely songbirds and their wooden birdhouse using the Winsor & Newton Cotman Sketcher Box set. She will also show you her completed piece for the final premium class, which will be performed next Tuesday. I'll put the link in the chat for the upcoming class for those of you who'd like to sign up if you not have done so already. Enrollment is limited to the first 100 people to sign up, and it's a 90-minute class. For today's class, there was a sketch outline made available prior, and we will put that link in the chat for you as well, for those of you who wish to download it. Upon completion of the class, an email will be sent to you asking you to fill out a survey. Please let us know what you thought about this class, how we did, and if there's any particular topics that you'd like to see Mandy perform for us in the future. The class replay will be available in 24 hours on michaels.com and Michael's YouTube channel, and the link will be shared throughout the chat class time as well. As we're about to begin, please feel free to follow along and paint with Mandy, or sit back and relax and enjoy the class. And with that, I'll pass over to Mandy.
All right, thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. Welcome to part 3 of 4 of the Birds of a Feather class. When we get through this class, we'll be more than halfway done, which kind of surprises me. Tim and I have mentioned before, it took a while in the making to create these classes. So I'm thrilled we're halfway through. And so today we're going to be painting a birdhouse with songbirds on it. The type of songbird we're going to learn how to paint today are blue tits, which are native to Europe. And I used to live in Europe, and they're beautiful birds. That's why I chose those birds for this particular project. So I'm going to go ahead and share my other camera so we can get started. All right, so I always start with an overhead view of the supply, so you can just make sure you have everything you need. So a glass of water, a larger palette today. We're going to be using all the wells on the palette, just like we did last week. And Sketcher's pocket set, we're using just the number 4 brush today, which is the same as the first 2 classes. And I didn't do that intentionally, but I think it's nice that the first series just use 1 brush. And I have 2 here just because I'm using an older looking one that I don't paint with anymore to mix my paint colors. And then I have a graphite pencil and eraser just for drawing the outline. If you've already transferred the outline, then you don't need to worry about having a pencil and eraser. Paper towel for blotting. I am using professional 140-pound cold press watercolor paper, the Winsor & Newton brand. And as per usual, we'll get started by sketching the outline. So I'll just scoot a few things aside so I can sketch along with you here. And I'm going to pull over the actual outline to work from. So this is more of a technical drawing. It might be easier to get straight lines if you use a ruler, but because we only have 55 minutes left, I'm going to freehand draw it and just do the best I can. So I'm going to start by drawing the top arch of the roof line, which is 2/3 of a triangle. And I'm just going to sort of go to the middle or top quarter of the paper and start the top of the arch there. And I'm just going to draw 2 lines that are about 3 inches long to make the top arch of the roof line and make it look like 2/3 of a triangle. And then I'm going to draw this little line that's only about 1/4 of an inch long, just right through the top middle arch of the roof line. And this will help me create the 2 boards or 2 pieces of wood that create the front arch of the roof line. And then I'm going to draw 2 parallel lines to make those front boards that make up the front arch of the roof line. Now these second lines extend a little bit past the first line. And you can always erase if you make a mistake like I just did there. Just do the best you can. And then I'll draw smaller lines to connect that top line for the arch and then that bottom line for the arch. And then I think I'll proceed by drawing the top of the roof. So I'm going to draw this line that the top songbird is perched on top of, and that line's maybe about 1.5 inches long. And then I'll draw a parallel line, a line that runs parallel to that top line we drew for the right side of the roof. So it's going to be the same angle The second line is going to be the same angle. And then I'm going to draw a horizontal line to connect the top of the roof line to the line I just drew for the top of the roof. And then I'll go ahead and draw the bottom of the roof on the right side. So I'm going to draw another parallel line and then sort of an angled vertical line to connect. And we have the top of our roof. And I'll see if I can make these lines a little bit darker so you can see what I'm doing better here. I know it's hard to pick it up over the camera. Okay, so now I'm going to draw the two slightly angled lines that make up the main body birdhouse. And these lines are about 2.5 inches long. And so I'm going to start about 1/2 inch from the base of the left side of the front part of the roof line. This probably sounds confusing if you're trying to listen to me. So I'm going to draw angled lines about 2.5 inches long each side. There we go. And then I'm going to draw this line at the bottom. It's sort of the support for the birdhouse. It extends a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right of the front of the birdhouse. So I'm going to draw a line, sort of serves as the foundation. And then this too kind of creates a board. So I'm going to draw a parallel line that's about 1/4 inch below. The second parallel line to create that board, and then lines to. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw this other little rectangle that makes up the side of the foundation. And again, it's just going to be 2 parallel lines and then a line to connect on the right side. This line is maybe 1.25 inches long. And then connect it on the side. And then I'm going to go back to the front of the birdhouse, but to the side, the right side. So I have this line here. I'm going to draw a parallel line to this one that's about 1.25 inches apart. And it's going to be the same angle as the right side of the front of the birdhouse. And this is the side of the birdhouse. And then I'm going to draw the bottom post for the birdhouse. It's just 3 lines. The first 2 are about 5/8 of an inch apart. And then the space between the second and third are maybe just 1/4 inch. So basically we're going to be creating an illusion today where we have the front of the birdhouse that's a lighter value, and then we have the side that's a darker value. And this will kind of create some form. It'll cause the birdhouse to not look flat, but actually look 3-dimensional. All right, and then I'm going to draw a circle right through the middle of the birdhouse where one of our songbirds is going to be peeking through. So a circle as best you can. It's okay if it's not perfect looking. And then the little perch. The perch is a real skinny oval. It's about 1 inch. And then there's a circle for the very far left tip of the perch. And then we're ready for our songbirds. So for our songbirds, I'll start with the one that's sort of peeking through the circle. I'm going to begin by drawing just kind of a rough shaped oval through the middle of the circle to kind of serve as the body and part of the head. So just sort of a rough shaped oval through the middle of the circle. And then I'm going to draw a second oval that sort of overlaps with that oval I just drew to kind of serve as a foundation for the head. So I kind of drew an oval and an oval for the body and the head. And now I can shape and form it to look more like the bird. So I'm actually going to start with his little talons that sort of peek over the circle. And then I'm going to move to the head. So I'm going to erase what's from that initial circle I drew on the birdhouse. I'm going to erase that so it doesn't throw me off here. And I'm going to draw the eye where I see it on my outline. So I'm just going to draw a circle for the eye. And I'm going to draw that little forehead shape right above it. And from his eye to the left of it, there's 2 parallel lines that kind of create a rectangle. And then there's the beak. And then I'm going to sort of fix up his forehead here and make it look a little better, a little bit more like the outline. So I almost see the paper as clay, and I draw the initial shapes, and it's almost as if I'm forming the clay by carving out and drawing the basic shape into more detail. what I see on the actual object. All right, so he has like a little chin here. So just two thin parallel lines that kind of run right beneath his beak and onto his head. And then it almost looks like he has a necklace. I'm kind of seeing this as a necklace on his neck. So then I'm going to draw this necklace shape, just drawing approximately what I see. These are loose looking birds, so it really doesn't have to look perfect. It doesn't have to look exactly like what's on the outline. And this necklace sort of curves around and meets up with his eye. So I'm going to draw those two parallel lines that sort of meet up with his eye. And then we kind of have his head done there. And then for his body, he just has another line that kind of runs through the middle to separate, I guess you could say, his belly from his backside. All right, and then I'm just going to fix up that circle that I sort of erased a little as I was fixing up my bird. And then we're going to draw the top bird. So for the top bird, I'm going to start by just drawing the basic shape of the songbird. Just sort of basic shape of the songbird. You can also do those two circles or ovals if that would help. And after I have the basic shape of the songbird done, I'm going to draw on his eye, which is a little circle. I'm going to draw those two parallel lines to the right of his eye and then his beak. This songbird almost looks like he has a little gullet underneath his beak. So I'm going to draw that. And if that ends up on the final songbird, it's fine. If it doesn't, it's fine. And I'm going to draw his little forehead shape. Almost looks like a teardrop in a way, the sideways teardrop. And then his little C shape that looks like a necklace. At least I think it kind of looks like he's wearing a necklace. Connect that to his eye. And then this bird has a wing. So I'm going to draw the wing. And it looks like he has another little wing, but it's just to sort of mark off the darker value underneath his wing. And then I'm going to go ahead and then fix up his tail and his backside, make it look a little bit more like the outline. And then last but not least, for this top songbird are his legs and talons, or feet, or whatever you want to call them. And they sort of rest on the birdhouse. So I'm just kind of copying what I see. And we have our outline. There's one other thing I want to do though. It's not on the outline, it's on the finished drawing. You can see these vertical lines that run through the front of the birdhouse. I want to go ahead and sketch those in. You can totally freehand it, and that's what I've been doing when I paint them on, but it may help if we go ahead and draw them in. So I'm going to start right at the top arch of the roof line, and I'm just going to draw a straight line. I'm going to stop at the circle and then begin again at the bottom of the circle, stop at the perch, and then begin again at the bottom of the perch. And then I'm just going to eyeball maybe a 1/2 inch and draw another straight line down, about a 1/2 inch, another straight line down. And I'm just going to squeeze on as many as I can on both sides. So it'll just sort of be a guide when we're ready to paint on these lines. Again, you can freehand them, that is fine. And then I just want to make note, all these lines that are on each piece of the birdhouse, we're not going to draw those on the outline. They're just sort of a visual for the direction you should apply your strokes when we're applying the wood grain. So like this roof here, it's at an angle. If you were to paint on your strokes in a horizontal manner, it would look off. And so just make sure your strokes follow the natural curve and direction of each piece of wood that makes up the birdhouse, if that makes sense. So I just want to point that out, but I'll remind us of this as we work today. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to set these aside as well because we're ready to mix our colors. We're actually going to mix our colors as we go today because I didn't put a heat gun on the supply list. And so I want to use the time it will take to mix colors as we go to serve as drying time for our paint, if that makes sense. So I've done this before. I don't do it often. I usually prefer to mix all of the paint colors at once, but today we're going to mix as we go. So I'm going to set these aside, pull down my palette, my glass of water, my Sketchers pocket set, my older number 4 brush that I don't paint with anymore, and my paper towels. All right, so we're going to start with a few colors here. I'm going to begin by taking my number 4 brush. I'm going to stick it in the water, swish it around. In the first 2 wells on your palette, just the first 2 wells, I'm going to place 3 scoops of water. So I'm going to use my brush as if it were a spoon. I'm going to sort of scoop out some water, hang my brush over one palette and sort of move it up and down to release the water that's on the brush into the well. And I'm going to repeat that 2 more times into the first well. I'm going to do that 3 times into the second well. So each of these 2 wells will have 3 scoops of water in them. And we're going to mix our 2 browns that we're going to use on our birdhouse to start. And then we're going to use those 2 colors to mix 2 washes. So we're just going to start with a light brown and a dark brown. So the light brown is going to be an equal mixture of burnt umber, which is the darker brown in your set, and yellow ochre, which is the yellow on the bottom row. We've mixed this color before when I did a coffee class a few months ago. So it's going to be 3 passes of yellow ochre, 3 passes of burnt umber. When I say pass, I'm going to take my wet brush. I'll start with yellow ochre. I'm just going to run it into yellow ochre for just a second. I'm going to stir it into the first well with 3 scoops of water, wipe my brush on each side on the edge of the palette to release excess paint, and that's 1 pass. I'm going to repeat that 2 more times. It does not need to be a slow process. You can move at a pretty brisk pace. So 3 passes of yellow ochre, and I will just clean and blot my brush really quick. And I'm going to repeat that to burnt umber, 3 passes of burnt umber. And this will give us a light brown shade that will maybe remind you of coffee, because we did use this coffee color, like I said, in a coffee class I taught. Almost looks like a golden brown, or like I had mentioned spicy brown mustard last week. It kind of looks like that color a little bit. So a lighter brown, and then I'm going to clean and rinse my brush. And then we're going to mix a dark brown. Dark brown is going to be equal burnt umber, which is the darker brown we just used, in ultramarine blue, which is right above it. So it's going to be 3 passes of each. We've mixed this color before too. So I'm starting with burnt umber, but you can start with ultramarine blue if you want. It's not a big deal which color you start with. Same with the light brown. You can start with the burnt umber if you want. All right, and then that should give you a nice dark brown. 3 of each. I'm going to clean and blot my brush. And so the next 2 colors we're going to mix are actually going to be washes. So what is the difference between a wash and a paint mixture is a wash is much more water than pigment, whereas I mix my paint colors pretty equal paint to water ratio, sometimes a little bit more paint than water. So in order to mix the washes, what we're going to do is we're going to place 6 scoops of water into the next 2 wells on our palette. So instead of 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to do that to the next 2. And the good news is we're not going to have to do any passes for these 2 washes because we already have the colors we need to make the washes. So into the first well with 6 scoops of water, I'm just going to take my clean and blotted brush. I'm going to stir it into the lighter brown. And I'm going to stir that into the 6 scoops of water. I'm going to wipe it lots of times on the edge of my palette because I want to make sure excess water is off that brush. And I'm going to do that 1 more time, stirring my brush into the light brown and then stirring it into the 6 scoops of water. So it's basically 2 stirs of the paint mixture into the 6 scoops of water. And I'm going to do the same thing to the second well with 6 scoops of water with a dark brown. So we're basically making a light brown wash and we're going to make a dark brown wash. So I'm going to take my brush, stir that into the dark brown, stir that into my 6 scoops of water, wipe it lots of times so I don't add more water to the paint mixture, and then do it a second time. And that gives us a lighter brown wash and a darker brown wash. And I can tell I'm going to need a little bit more dark brown paint today. So you guys can catch up here for a second while I just mix a little bit more dark brown paint. So we're going to be using both the washes and the paint mixtures today. It's going to be both. All right, so we have 2 more colors to mix and they're for our birds. So we don't need much paint at all for the birds. So instead of 3 scoops of water into the next 2 wells on our palette, I think we just need 2 scoops. So into the next 2 wells, 2 scoops of water. And I'm gonna take it easy on you guys. These 2 colors just use 1/2 pan. So into the first one, we're going to mix lemon yellow, which is the lightest yellow on the top row. It's far left. Mine has a little bit of green on it, so I'm just cleaning it off with a wet brush before I start mixing it. But into these wells, we only need 3 passes. Since we only did 3 scoops of water, we only need 3, you might need 4 passes, but I'm just trying not to mix too much paint, so we're not wasting paint. So I did 2 scoops of water, 3 passes of lemon yellow. And then into the next well on your palette with 2 scoops of water, we're going to mix Cerulean blue hue, which is top row far right. I'm going to do 3 passes of that. This is a really bright blue color. It's really pretty. All right. And my cerulean blue almost needs replaced. So I had to do a little bit more than 3 passes just to make sure I pulled enough water from that half pan. But here's the start of our palette. This is what we'll be working with for a few minutes here. So I'm going to kind of set these aside. I'm going to make sure the washes are pointed towards me so I don't pull from the pure paint. In this first step, we're just going to be using the washes. We just needed to go ahead and mix the pure paint so that we could create the washes. And I'm going to switch to my number 4 that I'm going to actually paint with. And I'm not going to put the older number 4 too far away because I will be using it again when we mix more colors. All right, so I'm going to pull back over my sketch here. And I'm going to do something a little different. Usually at this point, I'll pull over my finished painting. But today I have this little printout here. It's on the written directions that I provide for my classes. And it's basically a template or a chart for you to follow on what wash to put where. I had mentioned that our birdhouse, we kind of want it to look lighter on the front and then darker on the sides, so it looks 3-dimensional. And so we're going to apply light brown to certain sections of the birdhouse and then the darker brown to other sections. The good news is wherever we apply the light brown wash in this step, it'll always receive light brown, whether that be the wash or the pure paint mixture, with one exception, which is just the very top arch of the roof line, where I kind of want it to look like it's hanging over the birdhouse. It isn't just flush with it, but actually has a bit of an awning. That's the only exception, but I'll remind us of that. But for the most part, this top or this front facing arch, the top of the roof, the side of the birdhouse, the bottom, each of those sections of wood are only going to receive either light brown or dark brown. So I'm going to use this template to start. And as soon as we apply wash to the entire birdhouse, I'll remove this and we can just follow this as a guide. All right, so I'm going to begin with the front arch of the roof line. Both of those sections receive light brown. So I'm going to use my number 4 brush and use my wash, my light brown wash, and I'm going to apply the light brown wash to the entirety of the front arch of the roof line. Now, I don't want to put too much wash on my brush. I don't want any puddles or for it to be so saturated with water that it doesn't dry quickly. So try to just have enough water or wash on your brush to just paint each section evenly so that you don't have a wet mess on your hands, because that may make it a little harder as we progress through this study. So I've painted the entire front arch with the light brown wash. Now I also want to be careful about painting a section that's directly next to what we've just painted, because we could have some of the washes bleeding into each other. And I'd like them to stay distinct as much as possible. So we're kind of going to be jumping around. So I think where I want to go next is the very base or bottom of the bird's nest, and that will also receive light brown. Basically, the entire front of the birdhouse is light brown and the sides are dark brown. So I'm going to paint this bottom piece of wood here with a light brown wash in the same manner I did the top arch. And my classes, I'm not gonna, pull any punches. They move fast. So if I move a little quick for you, just know you can always watch the replay tomorrow and pause as needed to keep up. You can also try and follow along with the written directions that I provide. Just know that. But in order to give you the best class possible, I do move at a pretty brisk pace. All right, I'm going to also paint the left side of the post, and that's also light brown. So I can go ahead and paint this light brown because it touches light brown. And for this post, I don't try to be real gentle with the bottom end points of my brush strokes. I just try to be real loose with it. So I'm just going to pull it down, and wherever it ends. I kind of just want to give the impression of a post and not try and paint on a perfect looking post. So you can see my lines are just sort of jagged and it's not a perfect rectangle. All right, so I think what I want to paint now is the side of the birdhouse. because there's not much light brown overlapping. So I'll clean my brush, I'll blot it. So we're going to move to the darker brown wash because we're working on the side of the birdhouse. And to prevent any wash from bleeding into each other, I'll kind of paint the right side first, and then I'll paint where it may touch the light brown wash. So I'm covering the entire side of the birdhouse with this dark brown. Again, if you can, try to have just enough paint on your brush or wash on your brush to cover the paper so that our paint can dry in a fairly quick manner today. And if any of your brown wash bleeds into your light brown wash, don't worry about it. It's okay. I'm just trying to avoid it as best I can. All right. And then the right bottom of the roof line, I'm going to paint dark brown. And I'm also going to paint the bottom right of the foundation dark brown. In case you haven't guessed yet, we're going to do the front of the birdhouse last. We're doing all the side elements and then we'll move to the front of the birdhouse. So the top of the roof, I'm going to also paint the dark brown wash. You see that? I didn't put dark brown on the chart because there were a few areas that were pretty small and I couldn't fit in dark easily. So I just made it brown, but it's the dark brown wash. And if you have other brush sizes, you could probably use a larger brush for this step only and apply the wash to these areas a little bit quicker. But you may not believe me, but I try to keep the supply list limited. Sometimes I'm more successful than others, depending on what the project is. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and do the bottom right of the post using the dark brown. Same thing, I'm just going to just have loose lines at the very bottom. I'm not going to try and paint on a perfect rectangle or anything. And then we're ready for the front of the birdhouse. So I had mentioned the front of the birdhouse is a little bit different. So I want the top of the front of the birdhouse to look darker. So it looks like we have a little bit of an awning with the roof line. So for this very first step, I'm going to begin by applying the dark brown wash along the arch or just underneath that arch. And then I'll apply the light brown to everything else. I am going to be very careful around the bird. I'm not going to apply any paint to the bird. You can apply it to the circle part, just not to the bird, and it's okay to apply it to the perch. Just try and avoid the bird as best as you can. So I'm going to begin with the dark brown, and I'm going to apply that along the bottom of the arch or the underside of the roof line here. I'm going to turn a little bit so I'm working at a comfortable angle. And then I'm going to apply light brown to the rest of the front. So it's just the dark brown to the top of the roof line and then light brown to everything else. And it may help if you apply the light brown under the dark brown right away, so the light brown wash doesn't have a chance to dry. And that way they can sort of just gently merge into each other. So I'm just sort of moving my brush back and forth where to help those two colors meet and blend into each other. I'm going to apply the light brown wash to everything else, being careful around the bird as best I can. Rotate if you need to. We'll get the front painted. I'm turning mine in circles here. It's okay if you go over his little talons. That's not a big deal because the talons are just going to receive black. And black is darker than this brown or any other color we're going to be adding. So it's okay if you add light brown over the talons, if that will make it easier for you. I don't know if they're called talons on a songbird. That might just be birds of prey, but hopefully you know what I'm talking about. His little feet or claws. All right. And we have our birdhouse with the wash initially done. So we're not done with our washes. We're going to use them one more time here. We're basically going to go in the same order we just went in, but this time we're going to apply wood grain strokes. So to apply the wood grain, we're mostly just going to be using thin hatching strokes to kind of mimic wood grain. And I can finish this now because I think we can now tell wherever it's light brown, that's where we're going to apply light brown. Wherever there's dark brown, that's where we're going to apply dark brown. But if you look at my finished example, I have a few strokes that kind of go up and then angle down, and I have a couple circles. So sometimes wood grain has knots in it or some irregularities. So for the most part, I'm going to be using thin straight lines, hatching strokes, where I'm lifting my brush in between each stroke. But you can also get fun and also apply a few curved strokes or circles to look like knots. So I'm going to start again where I began last, which would be the front arch of the roof line. Remember to follow the direction of each section of the birdhouse as you apply the strokes. And if you're not sure what direction you need to go, just look at the outline and it will sort of guide you. So I'm going to start with the front edge of the roof line. I'm going to put some light brown wash on my brush. You can kind of start wherever, and I'm not going to try and cover all of the wash I put on initially. Not at all, because I want this to look like wood grain, not like a second total coverage with the wash. But I'm going to go over each section of the birdhouse, kind of going in the order I went before. And I'm just painting on lines and curves and circles to mimic wood grain. And this particular layer, believe it or not, will mostly be hidden, but it's helping to build up the texture. And that might be hard to see because we're using washes. Let me see if I can hold that up, and you can see a little bit, you can see gaps where you can see the first layer that we painted on fully, and now the second layer where we're just sort of painting on wood grain with the wash. So we began with the front arch of the roof line, then we did the bottom front support at the base of the birdhouse. So then I'm going to go there. I'm just going to add some more wood grain. And then I believe we did the bottom left post. So I'm going to add some there. So this doesn't need to be a take your time kind of process. Just throw on some hatching strokes. This isn't the layer that really matters or shows the wood grain. All right, then I believe we moved to the right side of the birdhouse. So I'm going to switch to the dark brown wash because we use the dark brown wash as the full layer. So I'm going to use the dark brown wash now, and I'm going to apply it to the right side of the birdhouse. You can use the side of your brush for some to make the wood grain a little thicker in some spots than others. There's really not a wrong way to do this. We just don't want to have too much paint on our brush that we create puddles. We just want to be careful for that, to be mindful of all the other things we want to do to this. And then after the side, I'm going to move to the top of the roof and do the same thing. Make sure your strokes are angled to follow the direction of this part of the birdhouse. Just follow the direction of those two parallel lines, the long parallel lines that make up the sides of this section. Just put more wash on your brush, however often you need. Just filling it in here. I keep wanting to put my brush into the pure paint. I'm sure many of you have done that. That's why I have them pointed right at me. So it'll be my impulse to put my brush there and not over here. So I'll be turning it again when we get to the pure paint colors after this step here. And now I move to the side of the roof. And then I'm going to do the side of that base or support. And then I believe we did the side of the post. And then we'll have the front of the birdhouse. So front of the birdhouse, it's the same thing as last time, where I'm going to start with the dark brown wash, and I'm just going to apply it on the underside of the roof line. I'm just applying the wash to the underside of the roof line on the front part of the birdhouse. And then I can go ahead and apply a few dark wood grain strokes along the upper part of the front, but I'll probably do these more broad and more scribble scrabble strokes because I just want this whole part to be a bit darker. So I'll show you what I mean. I say scribble scrabble a lot in my classes. I'm just going to sort of take it and just scribble back and forth with this dark brown along the top of the roof line. So see, I'm just moving it back and forth. My strokes are ending in various spots. And it kind of creates texture, but it also makes it darker along the top. And then I'm going to use the light brown wash to create the same wood grain strokes we've been using everywhere else to the rest of the front of the birdhouse. The only exception would be the circle the bird is peeking through. I'm just going to do solid light brown again. So the circle the bird is peeking through, I'm just going to do solid light brown again. Into the perch, I'm just going to do solid light brown again. But to everything
sorry to interrupt. Someone just
Yeah, sure.
noticed on the birdhouse, if you look at where the roof is on the left side, looking at it, the
I know
one
what
piece
you're
is
saying.
missing. It looks like it's hanging there.
I always forget to put that in. Isn't that funny? Good job noticing that, whoever that was. Kudos to
That
you.
was Lisa T. Thank you, Lisa T.
Lisa T, good job. Yes. So you can draw like a little triangle here for the underside of the roof. If you didn't put that in, it's not a big deal. That's just going to receive dark brown. So I'm just going to throw in dark brown wash there. But yeah, I always forget that little piece. It just kind of helps bring it all together. But yes, good
That was
catch
great
there.
having the finished piece on the side and then the piece you're working on. So
Yes. So you're able to notice where I am forgetting things. Yeah, good job. Good kudos to you. All right, so I'm just going over the front of the roof line with some wood grain strokes. I'm being careful around the bird. And I am turning my work as I go just to kind of help me maintain control. It helps me to kind of twist and turn and not work from the same angle. Although next week, if you come to the premium online class, to get the background of the bird, we are going to have to tape it down. So I will have to work more carefully next week, at least for the background part of the class. I won't be able to twist and turn since I'll be taping it down. I mean, I suppose I could tape it down to like a clipboard, but that's not how I've been practicing. So, all right. So you can see I have some wood grain to the front of the birdhouse now. It's light and it's subtle at this point. The layers of the birdhouse are just kind of gradually brought up. So it'll be a process. So I'm going to rinse my brush, blot it on my paper towel, and we're going to tackle the birds now, just the first couple of colors. So we're just using the yellow, we're just using the blue. So the yellow is just going to be to the bellies, and then the blue is going to be wherever you see blue on this finished example. So to his forehead, to his sort of necklace, if you will, to his wing and tail, and to the bottom bird, to his necklace, his kind of upper back, and his forehead. So I'll walk us through it. I just want to give you like a little heads up. So I'm going to start with the lemon yellow. And I'm going to use a dab stroke. I've used this stroke before in my classes. It's almost like a small hatching stroke, or it's like I think it's kind of a combination between a stippling stroke and a hatching stroke. So I'm just going to sort of blot my brush on the paper and then slightly lift or pull as I lift it up. And I do it pretty quick. So I'm not trying to fully cover the white of the paper at all. I'm just sort of dotting on that lemon yellow color to the birds, to the top bird, and then also to the belly of the bottom bird. Just sort of dab it on there. And then you can clean and blot your brush. And I'm going to use the cerulean blue to anywhere we see blue on these songbirds. So I'm going to use it. I'm going to do more small hatching strokes with the blue, I think. So to the forehead, I'm going to use the tip of my brush and just sort of hatch on a few strokes. Again, not trying to fully cover the white of the paper. That little C shape that I'm calling a necklace. And to the wing. I guess the wing I'm doing more of a dab stroke because it's a larger area. It's okay if some of the blue bleeds into the yellow. And to the tail.
Mandy, when you get through with that, can you hold it up to the camera a little closer?
Absolutely, sure thing.
Thank you.
All right, bottom songbird, dab it onto the forehead, the back side, and his little necklace thingy. All right, so it's just those two colors, blue where the birds are blue, yellow where it's yellow. And then we'll be ready to mix a few more colors. All right, so I'm gonna set, I'll try to keep this over here for those of you who aren't done yet. You can see what I've done. I just wanna try not to get any water on my paper here. And we are going to mix 4 colors right now. And we're going to start with the first one is black. So into 1 well on your palette, let's place 3 scoops of water. Into 1 well on your palette. So 3 scoops of water. We've mixed black in a lot of my classes. My favorite way to do it is with the ultramarine blue and burnt umber combo. So I'm going to begin by doing 3 passes of burnt umber into this well on my palette. So 3 passes of burnt umber. And then I'm essentially just going to add ultramarine blue to the burnt umber until I achieve black. It'll probably take 4 to 5, maybe even 6 passes of ultramarine blue to get black. So if your paint mixture feels a little thick, you can always add a little bit more water to it. If your paint ends up looking a little on the blue side, like a deep dark midnight blue or navy, then you'll actually want to add a little bit more brown. So it can be a slight back and forth game to get black, but I find black needs more blue than it needs burnt umber. And then you don't need to rinse your brush after you mix black. Don't worry about it. You can just kind of stir it into the next well on your palette, because we're going to mix gray next. And then you can add 3 scoops of water to that well. So it gives us like a nice base for gray when you stir what's left on your brush for mixing black into the next well on your palette. If you rinsed your brush though before I had a chance to tell you not to, just put your brush a little bit into the black and then stir that into the 3 scoops of water. That also works. And I'm just going to add 3 to 4 passes of white, Chinese white, to our gray to turn it gray. And we really don't need much gray. The gray is really just for the birds to help some of the white areas on the bird not look white. Like we still want a little bit of value there, a little bit of shading. So I think I added 4 passes there. So you just sort of want a middle value gray, maybe even a lighter gray. I went ahead and added 1 more pass. So that's why we didn't need much black in there. We just need a little bit of black and then a lot of white to create our gray paint mixture. And then we're going to mix 2 more colors for our songbirds. So just as we did with the cerulean blue and the lemon yellow, I think we just need 2 scoops of water because we really don't need that much paint. So into the next 2 wells on your palette, do 2 scoops of water. And just as before, one of the colors is just going to use 1 half pan. So the first color we're going to mix is just ultramarine blue. So ultramarine blue, probably just 3 passes will be enough to get the right paint to water ratio. So 3 passes of ultramarine blue into one of those wells with 2 scoops of water. And then we're going to mix a chartreuse color. It's one of my favorite colors. It's sort of like a lime green. So to mix it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 passes of lemon yellow, which is the same color we used over here. We could probably just work from this one, but just in case you want to make any final adjustments, we'll make a whole new color. So 2 passes of lemon yellow. And then to turn it chartreuse, I'm going to do a pass of sap green and stir that in. And you'll see how it gives us like a nice kind of lime chartreuse green color. So that was 2 passes lemon yellow, 1 pass sap green. And then we're ready to keep going here. So let me move things around. So I'm going to be using the pure light brown and dark brown now. So I just twisted my well so that hopefully it'll be my impulse to put my brush into the pure paint mixtures and not the washes. Let me get a glass of water here. Every class I talk so much, my throat starts to feel dry towards the end. So, all right. So sorry for that. All right, so I'm going to get my nicer number 4 brush out to paint with. And so we're going to proceed with more wood grain, but we're going to be using the pure paint colors now. So same as before, wherever you applied light brown, you'll apply the light brown paint color. And wherever you apply dark brown, you'll apply the dark brown paint color. I'll aid us when we get to the roof line though, on the front of the birdhouse. All right, so I'm going to start with the front edging of the roof line, and it's going to be the same thing. I'm just going to apply wood grain strokes. This is going to go on much darker because we're using the pure paint. You can put on as much as you want, but I will tell you this, if it goes on a little dark for you and you don't feel like it's all sort of merging in, what you can do is you can just place your brush in the water for a split second, wipe it a few times on the edge of the palette, and then apply a diluted version of that onto sections. Basically, you're just creating that wash by doing that without having to actually dip your brush into the wash. And then that can kind of help the colors better merge into each other. So I did that here. I applied strokes on each side and then kind of did the wash through the middle. But I mean, this is your project. On this side, maybe I'll just do wood grain through that whole thing. And this can be a multi-layered approach. This doesn't have to be the only layer. You apply wood grain using the pure colors. You can always make adjustments by adding more. I think usually when I do this, I usually will repeat this step another time just to get it to the point where I'm happy and I think it has enough wood grain. So there's the top arch. I'm going to move to the bottom base of the birdhouse here with the light brown and do the same thing. Apply some wood grain strokes. I'll do a curved one. I haven't done a curved one in a second. Maybe a small circle to look like a knot in the wood. Maybe I will wet my brush on this one, wipe it several times, or you can even blot it once or twice, and then kind of smooth a little. If too much of that first layer with the wash is showing through, you can always add just a little bit of water to your brush. All right, and then I'll do the post down here using light brown. So we're just following the pattern we've already established with our paint colors. And now I'm ready for the dark brown. So I'm not going to ignore this little triangle like I have been. I'm going to start with a little triangle by just applying dark brown to it. Just fill in that whole thing with dark brown. And I will say, if you look at my finished piece here, the side of the birdhouse where it's dark brown, kind of on the left edging of each section, I like to add a little bit more so it looks distinct. So each section looks distinct from what it borders. So on the top of the roof, I may just apply solid dark brown along the left side here and along the top of the roof line even. And even along the bottom where it meets up with this other dark brown piece of wood. And then I'll go in with some wood grain. You can also, on certain parts if you want, instead of doing thin little wood grain strokes, you can even use the side of your brush and make bigger ones, sort of like what we did along the top arch of the roof line with the brown wash. So there's different things you can do to kind of help ease the color into whatever section you're working on. If you feel like too much of the bottom layer is showing, or you can just do a repeat layer of the same process to sort of gradually fill in and create the wood grain. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. So I'm going to add a little bit more along the top. I'm not going to add too much because I do want this to be able to dry. I don't want to create a globby mess as I create these wood grain strokes. Sometimes when I practiced, I did. Maybe I should show you one so you can know that I make mistakes. I'm not always happy with what I paint. Sometimes that's a process and it takes practice. It was a hot mess, let me tell you. All right, so I'm working on the side of the roof. Then I'll work on the right side of the main body of the birdhouse. More wood grain strokes. I might do that scribble scrabble stroke right here so that looks a little bit darker and set back underneath the roof line. You can see I'm doing hatching strokes, some curved. Maybe I'll do another little circle, just whatever you want to do here. Yeah, it's going to look like wood grain no matter what. This is a fun, I think it's a fun process. I'm going to do this little side piece here on the base of the birdhouse. I don't think I've done the right side of the post. Now we're ready for the front of the birdhouse. So I'm going to begin by painting the perch with dark brown. I'm just going to paint over the perch with dark brown. I'm also going to paint the circle that's still visible above and below the bird with dark brown. That will give that time just to dry before we go in with another layer on our birds. And then top of the roof line, I'm going to paint on dark brown just as we've done to make it look like an awning. Doesn't have to be a perfect straight line. And then I think I'm gonna do the scribble scrabble thing again. I'm gonna scribble scrabble right beneath that with my paintbrush.
Andy, I think you're gonna have to coin that technique. And maybe we can look down the road and we can do an actual whole class on it. I think that would be cool. All
On
different
scribble scrabble?
how you can do scribble scrabble. And the effects and how you can use it with other techniques to do different versions of scribble scrabble.
You could. What can I say? All right, now I'm gonna clean and blot my brush, and then I'm gonna continue with the light brown underneath the scribble scrabble of the dark brown. I'm gonna kind of start where the dark brown ends, and that's where I'm gonna apply the light brown. So that way I'm working sort of wet into wet a little, and it will ease the transition. And then some of that light brown will also mix with the dark brown and create some pretty transitional tones along the top arch of the roof line. And yes, I did have to turn my work in order to maintain control. Now along the bottom of the front, I'm probably not gonna place as much paint color because I do want the front of the birdhouse to look the lightest. So I might do that technique where I place my brush in the water and sort of dilute what's on my brush just a little. And kind of let the washes show through the most, not entirely, but the most. I'm kind of using my finished one as a guide. It looks the lightest just underneath the bird here. I'm applying a little bit of light brown along the roof line because I just want it to ease into the darker brown just a little bit better than what it is. Okay. And you can always go in with more wash as well, if needed. Just because we're kind of done with the wash doesn't mean you can't make adjustments with it. Okay, and then we're gonna paint the birds, and then we'll do those vertical lines for the birdhouse that I had mentioned. So for the next layer for our birds, I'm gonna start with the gray, and I'm gonna start with this top bird up here. All right, so I'm actually though where I'm gonna start on this bird, this is kind of important. I'm gonna start right underneath the tail and wing where you see this dark gray here, because the gray is gonna go on dark. So if I start on his face is gonna look too dark. So I'm basically gonna start on his tail, and then I'm gonna use the water in my brush. I'm gonna allow that to sort of dilute the gray so that when we apply it to the face, it won't be as dark as it was when we applied it just under the tail and the feather. So try to just put enough gray on your brush to do the whole bird. So I'm going to just put some gray on my brush here. I'm going to start by dabbing it underneath the tail and wing and a little bit to his belly, the underside of his belly. And then the water that's on my brush, it's kind of diluting the gray a bit. I now can dab it on his face, kind of around his eye, into the sort of triangular part on the top of the bird. And it's a lighter gray, because the water sort of diluted it as we applied it to the bird. Isn't that cool? How it does that. So if we started on the face, it would have gone on a lot darker than starting where we wanted it to be the darkest. And then if you still have gray on your brush, you can just go ahead and blot that onto the face and sort of forehead of the bottom bird. So it's still gonna look like the lightest value, but it won't be the white of the paper now, which is kind of important because we want these birds to stick out and not look washed out, which is why we used gray on a couple aspects of the bird. And then you can clean and blot your brush after you apply gray to the bird's faces and then to this top bird, the very top of his back. And then we'll use that chartreuse color, some chartreuse on my brush. And I'm going to use the dab stroke, and I'm just going to apply chartreuse pretty loosely to the belly of the top bird and to that triangular where we applied the gray. Just let the gray and chartreuse bleed into each other. And I'm also going to apply the chartreuse to the bottom bird on his belly. And this just adds a little bit of color over top of the lemon yellow. It's not super dramatic. And that's okay. We want it to just be a hint of that lime green. So to repeat, we applied gray to the face and to this top triangular section on this bird, and then chartreuse once again over the yellow section. But I'm not trying to cover all of the yellow. I'm still not trying to cover all of the tooth of the paper. Then I also dab chartreuse over the gray on this sort of upper backside of the top songbird. And then we'll use ultramarine blue. So we haven't applied anything over the blue yet, right? We've only applied it to new areas and over the yellow. So I'm going to put some ultramarine blue on my brush now. And I am going to do the same thing I did with the chartreuse over the yellow, but with the ultramarine blue to the cerulean blue hues, where I'm not going to try to cover everything. I'm just going to go over all the blues with a little bit of ultramarine blue. So I'll start with the forehead and just do some of those loose hatching strokes to somewhat cover, but not entirely cover the chartreuse I applied previously. I'm going to apply a little bit to that sort of necklace shape in his neck. So I'm working on the top one here. And to the top songbird, to his wing. If you look on my finished piece, you can see I actually painted on stripes. So I'm going to do that with this one. I'm going to paint on just 3 sort of stripes to create the wing. And maybe just a couple stripes to paint on the tail. And the bottom songbird, we can't see a wing, so I'm just going to blot it on his upper backside onto his little necklace thing and to his forehead. And golly, I see what time it is. We're going to run a little bit over today, but hopefully not more than 10 minutes with where we're at. We're close here. All right.
Maybe take your time, make sure we can run over. Actually, it's fine.
Okay, good deal.
Everybody wants to see the end of this. I want to see it.
Thank you for that, because I always like stress when I see the time and I don't want to rush, but I also want to make sure you guys learn the technique. All right. So
just the people who can't stay, the video replay 24 hours, michaels.com YouTube channel. You can watch the end of the video there.
Yes, very good. Okay. So one thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the light brown. I am going to apply it to those vertical strokes. I wanted to let that other layer of wash sort of set into the paper before I did this, so that these vertical strokes don't just like bleed into and create more of a wash. The lines can be different widths. So I'm kind of using the tip of my brush, but I'm also sort of pressing it a little so that I'm getting different widths as I apply these strokes. And then once this settles in, we'll just go over it with a dark brown to just make it a little bit darker. We have a little one over here. So we're just putting in those posts, if you will, and that alone is making it look a little bit more like my finished piece here. And to the perch, I'm just going to outline the perch with more of the dark brown paint, not the wash, the dark brown paint. So I'm going to use the tip of my brush. I'm holding my brush as if it were a pencil, and I'm going to trace around the circle at the edge of the perch, and then I'm going to trace around the outer edges of the line to kind of help that stand out. So I just traced around it with my dark brown. And I'm going to use my dark brown. I'm just going to paint a little bit on the underside of the roof line to help that look more like an awning. This may take even more layers than what we do today to really help that stand out. And we'll apply black to it here in just a second too. And I'm also going to apply more brown where I had mentioned I like to apply it to help it look a little darker and set out. So I'm going to apply more brown. So this, the arch of the roof line, the side of the arch, I'm going to apply it along the left side of that piece of wood to kind of help this piece sort of stick out a bit from its surroundings. So a few more wood grain hatching strokes. And you see what a difference that makes doing that. It makes a huge difference. And I'm going to do the same thing. So the top of the roof, left side and top, I'm going to apply a little bit more dark brown to help those sections sort of stand out. Put in a few more roof or wood grain strokes as you do that to kind of help it blend in. That also makes a huge difference. And then the right side of the birdhouse, I'm going to outline just under the roof line, just under that first board we applied a little more dark brown to. And along the left where it touches the front of the birdhouse. Same thing, you can put a few more hatching strokes to kind of help it merge in. I guess I'm kind of doing hatching / scribble scrabble. All right, and then the support The bottom right support, I'm going to also do the same thing, make that a little bit darker so it kind of stands out. And then last but not least, that triangular shape I forgot to draw in at the beginning. I'm just going to apply a little bit more dark brown there, make that look like it's on the back side of the roof. And then I think the vertical lines we painted on with the light brown are now dark enough that we can go over it with, I'm sorry, I may have said that wrong. So the vertical lines we painted on with the light brown, I think are now dry enough that we can go over them with dark brown. So I'm not trying to fully cover the light brown. I'm just going over each one with dark brown. And hopefully some of that light brown still kind of shows through to kind of serve as the lighter value. And I'm once again kind of using the tip of my brush, but also pressing it down a little bit. So I'm getting varying widths with these vertical lines. There we go. Oh, that looks good. All right. And then I feel like where the post meets up with the bottom board, we need a little bit more paint. This is looking a little flat to me. So I'm going to clean and blot my brush. I'm going to take the lighter brown and I'm just going to go right above the post and add a little bit more paint there. Maybe a little bit where the two post colors meet together. Just apply a little bit there just to kind of help that stand out a bit. All right, and then let's finish the birds. So we're going to add two colors to the birds. Excuse me. We're going to add black and then we're going to add cadmium yellow. And we haven't mixed cadmium yellow, but that's just going to take a second. We don't need very much at all, and we can just pull directly from the Sketchers pocket set. So I am going to turn my palette to black. The colors may have separated a bit, which happens as normal. Just give it a stir to kind of reacquaint the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber, to keep them from each wanting to go their own way. And I'm going to begin by outlining the eye on the top songbird. I'm going to use the very tip of my brush. I'm going to try and leave a little bit of the white of the paper peeking through the circle I draw around the eye to kind of serve as a highlight. So I'm not going to try and fully cover the eye with the black. I'm just going to outline it. I'll hold that up so you can see a little bit of white of the paper still peeking through, and that serves as a little highlight. And then I'm going to place little tiny dots from the right of the eye going over to the beak. And to the beak, I'm just going to outline it. I'm going to do a curved line down, a curved line up, and maybe a little line through the middle. So again, it would be great if some of the white of the paper is still peeking through, but I covered my whole beak and it still looks okay. And then, you know how I said it looks like this bird has a little gullet? Let's dot on some black on that gullet looking thing that's right beneath his beak. And then I'm just going to dot it up his necklace, not trying to cover all of the blues, and then around to meet up with the left of his eye again. So you're basically just dotting on thin dots of black to the whole necklace, and they'll bleed into each other. They won't actually look like dots when it's all dry. And then to the wing, I'm going to do 3 thin lines, those kind of curved lines we did for the blue. I'm just going to kind of gently go over those blue lines with the black. Just sort of detail out the wings. And I'm going to do the same thing along the bottom of the tail. So 3 thin lines along the wing and the bottom edge of the tail. And then where we applied the gray just under the wing, you can't even tell it's there now, at least not on mine. So I'm going to dot a little bit more on with the black, just under the tail and wing, maybe just a touch of black onto the belly of the bird. And if it goes on too dark, you can blot your brush and then kind of smooth it out with a blotted clean brush. There's our top songbird. And that was just with black, can you believe it? And then, oh, we still need to do his legs and feet though. And the legs and feet just received black. So you're just gonna paint on his little legs and feet with black. You may need to do a second layer of black. If it dries a little light, you can just go over it again with more black. And then to the bird that's peeking through the hole, it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to start by just outlining his eye, trying to leave a little bit of white through the middle to serve as like a highlight. And then I'm going to sort of dot from the left of his eye to his beak, and then outline his beak. I'm going to try and do an arch on the top, an arch on the bottom, and an arch through the middle. Oh, I did it this time. So you see that little highlight through the middle of his beak? It just adds a nice touch, having that little bit of negative space. If you can just leave a little bit of negative space when you outline the beak. And then I'm going to dot down his gullet. I'm going to dot around his little necklace thing and meet it back up to the right side of his eye. And then I'm going to apply black to his talons. And then I had mentioned cadmium yellow. So cadmium yellow, I'm just going to swish my brush really good. I'm not going to wipe my brush on the rim of the water glass. I'm just going to pull it out as if I'm putting a scoop into one of the wells on my palette. And I'm going to stir it over the cadmium yellow half pan. And then I am just going to dot that real boldly onto the belly of each songbird. And this will just add a touch of yellow to the songbirds. And it will dry really bold. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing next week. Really bold strokes on the bird. Let me see if I can't find that, and I'll show you for next week. All right, so this is the premium online class, a $20 fee. That's next week. There are still some openings if you want to take this class. I think the real highlight of this class is going to be learning how to do this background that's out of focus with the cherry branch that's in focus, but you also get to learn how to paint a really loose yellow warbler. So I hope you will be there for that. But if you're not able to do a premium online class, I do have one class coming up in May that I'll show you. That is this bicycle, enjoy the ride. And you can learn how to paint these loose looking flowers in a basket. And this is May 24th at 2 p.m. And this class should be available to register for either at the end of today or tomorrow. Definitely by the end of the week. So you can look for that class. It's, like I said, it's not able to be registered for now, but it will be soon. And you can always go to my website, mandypeltier.com, and you can click on upcoming classes. And when it is available to register for, I put the direct link on my website, and you can click on it and then sign up for it. So, but this is the Birdhouse. Again, you could make other little adjustments, add a little more paint here, a little more paint there, more wood grain using either the washes or the pure paint color. You keep fussing with it. But I think this looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how this looks. And I know I move at a brisk pace, but if you were able to keep up with me today, I would love to see your finished piece. If you feel like you can hold it up without paint dripping anywhere. So oh, these look beautiful. Wow. They look awesome. Good job on the wood grain, everyone who painted along with me. I mean, that just looks so neat. And some didn't do the bird inside the circle, but I love that. I love just the one perched on top. And that may have been easier to keep up with me that way too, just dealing with the one bird. So awesome job, guys. I just love seeing your finished artwork. It always looks so amazing. All right, so that's all I have for you today. If I don't see you next week, I hope I will see you in May at my bicycle class, and have a great rest of your week.